In London's West End, coffee shops do represent serious competition for the pubs. In London's West End, coffee shops do represent competition for the pubs. Typical are these three new Park Lane coffee bars, which are already a success. In London's West End, the coffee houses do represent serious competition to the pubs. Typical are these three new Park Lane coffee bars, which already are a success. In London's West End, the coffee houses do represent serious competition for the pubs. Typical are these new Park Lane coffee bars, which already are a success. This is Don Gordon, speaking from London. I'm here today to report on a serious decline in England's colourful and long-established public houses since the end of the Second World War. So far, since 1951, more than 500 licensed houses have closed their doors. Beer consumption has slumped from a comfortable 1.15 billion gallons to about 900 million, and that represents a sales drop of over 2 billion pints a year. This is Don Gordon, speaking from London. I'm here today to report on a serious decline in England's colourful and long-established public houses since the Second World War. So far, since 1951, more than 500 licensed premises have closed. Beer consumption has slumped from a comfortable 1.15 billion gallons to about 900 million. That represents a loss of 2 billion pints of beer a year. These statistics illustrate the fact that beer proprietors and pubs aren't sharing in the current boom in liquid refreshments in Britain. More soft drinks are being sold, more wine and spirits, but beer is barely holding its own. Yet the worst seems yet to come. Publicans are very worried about the fact that few young people are coming along to take the place of the old hands as they die off. What they fear then is that the young chaps, when they grow older, won't take their place as regulars. The Grapes, a Shepherd's Market pub, is typical of the English establishments trying to fight for the young people's trade. Its proprietor is Elizabeth Fountain, a veteran publican, wise to the ways of this tough business. The Grapes, a Shepherd's Market pub, is typical of those engaged in the battle for the young people's trade. Its proprietor is Elizabeth Fountain, a veteran publican, wise to the ways of this difficult business.
Hi, everybody, please. Okay, Miss Fountain.
Good morning, Mrs. Fountain.
Good morning, sir.
And tell me, How do you find the coffee bars have affected pub business?
Well, I think they have round here a lot.
And do you think there are any other factors at all?
Well, the taxes, I suppose, a lot, really.
And television, perhaps?
Television, yes, but not exactly around here.
I see.
Not television.
Do you feel that for yourself that pub business hasn't fallen off too much?
Not for us, exactly.
And why is that?
Well, it's more like the city and the offices these days are so busy, and of course it's cosmopolitan.
Ah, of course. Thank you very much. Now we'll take a look at one of these espresso coffee bars. Good morning, Mrs. Fountain.
Morning, sir.
And how's business?
Very good indeed, really.
And about these pubs in general, what do you feel is responsible for the present decline in business?
Well, I think television, some parts, espresso bars, and I should think taxes, high taxes. Of course, this is, as I say, this is cosmopolitan, so I don't mean to...
Good morning, Mrs. Fountain.
Good morning, sir.
And how is business today?
Very good indeed.
Concerning this decline in pubs, what do you feel is responsible for it?
Well, in my opinion, I should think it's television, espresso bars, and of course, I suppose, high taxes.
And have these espresso bars and TV affected your pub in particular?
Well, not exactly. Not exactly, not our pub especially.
Mrs. Fountain, what do you feel is responsible for the present decline in pub business in England?
Well, I should think, in my first opinion, would be television. Secondly, I should think would be espresso coffee bars. And thirdly, I should think the higher taxes.
And how has this affected your pub?
Well, it's all right. We're all right. It hasn't affected us at all. We're just in that unfortunate position, you see. But it's more like city houses or the offices around, but we're lucky. Just lucky. But I think we're very fortunate, very lucky to be in the position that we are.
Thank you, Mrs. Fountain.
Thank you.
Now I think we'd better go and take a look at some of these espresso coffee bars and see their reason for success. Mr. Napier, what effect do coffee bars like yours have on the pubs in the West End?
The effect would be this, that the public house in the West End has very little appeal for the teenage group in this country. The reason for that is, due to their tender age, they cannot go into the public house and drink. The atmosphere there is not really suitable for them. The coffee house, an advent in London post-war, was something which...
Okay, Jack.
Mr. Napier, what effect do coffee bars like yours have on the pubs in the West End?
The effect would be this. The public house in the West End of London, and London generally, has very little appeal to the teenage group because of their tender years. They can't very well go into a public house and drink solidly with the middle-aged people that one generally finds there. There's very little atmosphere to appeal to them. But when the coffee bar, which came into being in London just after the war, sort of opened up, there was something ideal for the teenagers. The atmosphere was right, decor right, they could have music, they could sit down, have a cup of coffee for a few coppers, and if they so desired, they could eat as well for not more than 2 or 3 shillings. Everything was right for the teenager. It's a sort of club, a meeting place for them, absolutely made for them.
Of course. Now, do you think this will last?
Yes, I do, because the teenager has no memory or no knowledge of going into a public house. He and she, they are being brought up on, shall I say, on coffee bars, being brought up on coffee, in fact.
Thank you very much, Mr. Napier.
Pleasure.
Mr. Napier, what effect do coffee shops like yours have on pub business?
Well, I would say it applies particularly to the teenage group, as well as partially to older people. The teenagers in this country, before the coffee house came into existence, had really very little place they could go to for entertainment besides the pictures. Public house didn't appeal to them because of their tender years. When the coffee shop came into being, there was a place they could go into to find a warm atmosphere, a place where, without spending very much money, they could sit down, drink coffee, listen to music, and generally be comfortable.
And do you think this will last, sir?
Well, yes, I do, because they haven't got used to drinking beer and whiskey in a public house. They're used to drinking coffee, and my coffee's good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Napier.
Okay, cut. Okay, Jack.
Mr. Napier, what effect do coffee bars like yours have on pub business in the West End?
The effect they would have, I would think, is this: that the public house is losing the teenage group of people to us. The coffee house is a place where the teenager can come in, sit down, enjoy a cup of coffee very cheaply, for a few coppers in fact, have a meal for 2 or 3 shillings, and generally sit there in an atmosphere of warmth and comfort and listen to the kind of music that they like, music that wouldn't really go down well in a public house, and they really feel at home here.
Do you think that this will last, sir?
Yes, I do, because the teenage group are being educated in coffee houses, not as their mothers and fathers in the public house. And I will say that the coffee they get in my place is very good, and they seem to enjoy it.
Thank you, Mr. Napier.
Pleasure.
Okay, Jack.
Love, oh love, what careless love. Love, oh careless love. Love, oh careless love. You've seen what careless